Hi, I'm Patricia Allingham Carlson, and this is part 3 of my painting from the Cliffs of Tyler. In video 3, I am detailing the trunks of the trees. I am adding more and more layers, more shadows, and more highlights. I removed the last of the masking that was on the many leaves of the trees, and then I began to add color and lift color simultaneously. There was an awful lot about painting leaves in this particular painting, but I hope you enjoy it and give it a thumbs up. Now let's paint. The tree trunks were an extremely important part of this painting, and the huge tree in the foreground of them all was the most important. It was strongly lit with sunlight on the left side and had a lot of red and gold in the brown of it. Some sort of pine tree or fir tree. It has a very heavily textured bark. So I'm laying in the basic colors, and then I'll be going back on top of them with additional glazes and more texturing strokes. As I paint upward, I am painting around where the leaf clumps come in front so they can remain bright colored. And looking at the tree bark closely, I'm finding all of the detailing and how it's structured, the shadows, the hollows, the flow of the bark. And this will be my most detailed tree because it is the closest to the viewer. I'm shading with brown and burnt sienna mixed together at this point. Moving up the tree, I'm continuing to add texture and detail. Let's skip ahead here. I continue working on the last of the two trees, or of all of the trees, excuse me. The trees on the far left are one dark one right next to one on top of it, or overlapping it. And I need to keep the distinctive light edge on the overlapping one to make it stand out against the dark one next to it. So many details in this painting. All the little tiny textures and bark brushwork to do, and then there are so many leaves. But it is coming together. It just takes lots of layers of glazing and lots of attention to detail the more I develop it. trees have all been painted at this point, and I am going back and adding second layers of glazing and shadow detail. And this will be done tree by tree for every tree. The dark lines going diagonally across the tree are from branches that are hanging overhead and casting shadows onto the tree trunk. So I'm pretty much painting just what I see in my photographic reference. And the trees underneath must all be painted before the leaves over top can be added. It's sort of fun to see the trees building their color and becoming more realistic the more layers I put on. As I move across the paper, I am now painting on trees that have texture and shadows already painted on them that have dried completely, and I'm layering in more color. If I apply the color lightly on top of what's already there, the underlayer will show through and hold all the brushwork. If I were to get it very, very wet and paint over it several times, then the work that was done underneath would be lost because it would be brushed out. So there's a fine balance with that as well. Getting down the textures I want for the undercoat and then painting the lighter coats on top to homogenize and bring the tree together without erasing everything that's already been done. And you could see the darkening color is being added, as well as some taking off of color where I may have gotten too deep a tone where there should be sunlight shining. My strongest lights were on the edge of the slope. And they provide a very nice, brilliant contrast. My choice is to see how much white I should leave to be entirely white and how much needs just a bit more shading or detailing. So it's a balance as to what looks right to me. And I'm sure all the artists out there have the same kind of challenge as they paint their own work. But leaving a white, pure white in your painting can make your painting look very much more fresh, as opposed to covering every single spot on your paper with paint. Because white is a color in watercolor that has a very valuable contribution to the composition. And here I'm adding some very small detailed little tiny leaves here and there on the forest floor. I'm not going to do too much of this. I'm also suggesting some sticks and some of the other odd shaped things that you find on the forest floor, as well as roots growing up around the trees. Another layer of paint for this tree, which is now dry. And lifting some paint from the tree on the far right. I'm detailing around the trees with some darker branches and leaves to make the lighter areas of the tree stand out more. Continuing to add details here and there where they seem to be needed. And deepening the tree on the left. Now I've developed the trees to the point where I need to see what's under the masking for the leaves that go over the front and foreground of the whole painting. So I'm removing the masking, and this is the last of the masking I've left, because I need to paint around the trees and show the trunks where they do show behind the leaves. And it was getting confusing with the masking still on. And here's where it looks now. Lots and lots of leaves to be painted, and maybe quite a few leaves to be left white. It's all a judgment call. So what I'm doing is finding the branches where they go down, carrying all these golden leaves, and starting with the yellows. Next, I want to mix up a very nice yellow green. To paint this in where the tree was not quite changed in color yet. I'm working around the sky. I'm working also around the tree trunks and trying to orchestrate a dance of cascading leaves, coming down in front of the viewer and partly obscuring the entire scene. This is a fun challenge, but as you can see, it's quite detail challenging, and there's just an awful lot to be painted. Yes, this painting took many hours to create, but I really did enjoy it. It was a fun painting to do. It had a personal tie into the scene and a memory of the day there that was interesting and unique and lovely. I'm doing some lifting here. I'm wetting down some areas and then taking color off with my paper towel. And then coming back to detail some more. Now I'm finding a branch in burnt sienna. And I don't just want to paint the branch as a line, because the branch peeks and hides amongst the leaves. It emerges and it gets covered. So I'm trying to paint it in that manner. Then the leaves will come back on top of it where I want to paint in some more golds. And last, the branches may need to be darkened. I'm mixing a lot of different greens and different tones here. And some of the colors I'm using are burnt sienna, sap green, hooker's green dark, burnt sienna and yellow ochre mixed with green, and then bright cadmium yellow mixed with green. I do think if you show lots of different shades of green, you might end up with something that looks more natural, because nature does have many different shades. And they are rarely the color that comes right out of the tube. But I do mix in the palette as well as mixing directly on the paper by layering and glazing. To get my darkest greens, I'm mixing hooker's green dark with indigo. And to get darker still, I sometimes use purple or sepia to mix in with that as well. So this is the branch amongst the others that comes down in foreground and covers up a lot of what the viewer sees looking out over the hillside and down the cliff at the water. So I came in with a pale yellow, and now I'm adding some accents of green leaves where the leaves haven't changed yet. The darker colors make the lighter colors stand out and give a little more structure. This was not even necessarily set up like this in the photograph. It was pretty much just a blur of yellow, but I wanted to try to capture some of the more realistic aspects and show the viewer what I was actually seeing. So I am keeping many leaves individual and trying to keep my pale colors pale. Painting leaves in itself is quite a challenge because you don't want to be uniform. Leaves grow in every which way, and they retreat and change colors and overlap and cluster. They do so many different things. So trying to make them random within the pattern of the way they actually are attached to the branches is a challenge too. So I guess we could call most of this painting Leaf Day, because that is what I did. But I do see it starting to come together, and the excitement of the next day's painting may see its finish. The uncovered parts of the trees have revealed themselves, and I'm starting to work on showing them now. I hope you enjoyed From the Cliffs of Tyler, and that you'll subscribe and ring the bell to get notices of future videos I post. In the description below, you'll find links to the materials I like to use, to my Facebook, my art page, my blog, and to art products I make. Comments are a big help too. I'll see you next painting.